is now my pleasure to introduce one of our two nonfiction mentors for this year, David Small. A couple of years ago, I was attending the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Conference in Los Angeles and had the great pleasure of hearing David present his work and knew that he had to come to the Loft. So several months of emails and phone conversations have led to this weekend, and I'm very grateful to have not only David, but his wonderful wife, Sarah Stewart, both with us this weekend, and they'll both be in conversation tomorrow morning with Susan Marie Swanson. Born and raised in Detroit, David became known in school as the kid who could draw good. After attempts at being a playwright, David switched his major to art when a friend told him that the doodles he made on his foam pad were better than any of the plays he had written. He wrote and illustrated Eulalie and the Hopping Head, which was published in 1981. More than 40 picture books have followed, either written or illustrated by David, including the Caldecott Honor and Christopher Medal winner, The Gardener, which was written by Sarah, and more recently, One Cool Friend, which was a 2013 Caldecott Honor book. His graphic memoir, Stitches, was published by W.W. Norton in 2009. It was a finalist for the National Book Award and was on pretty much everyone's bestseller list for that year. There are many quotes to read about this book, but I wanted to share this one from Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist Jules Feiffer because it touches on many of the topics that the group has discussed with David so far this weekend, including the overlapping of many different art forms and how many different ways there are to tell stories. And here's the quote. Like the boy in this autobiographical novel, my first reading of Stitches left me speechless and in awe. David Small presents us with a profound and moving gift of graphic literature that has the look of a movie and reads like a poem. From its first line, 4 pages in, Mama had her little cough, we know that we are in the hands of a master. It has been the group's great fortune to be in David's hand this weekend and to receive his profound and moving gift. Please welcome David Small.
I'm going to violate a few rules and expectations tonight. I didn't know really till I got here exactly what order things should be presented in. I spent the whole day talking about Stitches to a bunch of writers and from all disciplines other than memoir, fiction, people, poets. It was great. We had a really wonderful morning. And tonight people are reading memoirs. But you know, I've got a leg in two worlds. As the introduction told you, I have mainly my career in children's picture books. And the Stitches, which I hope you will take a look at on the table outside, was sort of an aberration in a way. It was something I needed to do for my own. It was sort of bibliotherapy for myself, but if there is such a term. But it turns out that it gave me a firm leg in the adult publishing world, which I guess I had always wanted in some ways, because before I became a children's book illustrator, I was an editorial artist for the New Yorker and the Times and the Post in Washington for many, many years, and I loved that work. And even when I got into children's books, I tried to write and also to find always manuscripts that balance between something that a child would find interesting or funny or whatever interesting, and something that that an adult could stand reading 50 times a week, which is quite a razor's edge to balance on. At any rate, since I spent the whole day talking about stitches and wasn't really aware that the public was coming tonight, probably expecting me to talk about stitches. I was going to talk about something that I was asked about quite a bit in the questions that I got before I came, which is my children's book work, and how one of the questions was a good one. I can't know if this is a paraphrase. It was, how did I manage to keep the wicked tone in my books, in most of my children's picture books, without falling off that razor's edge to that place that I personally have always dreaded, where you would find a parent sitting on a bed reading a book to a child and laughing their ass off while the kid is looking in bewilderment and wondering what the joke is all about. The question also went on to ask, what reins do you have to pull in terms of language and content? That's what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. I'm going to give you a picture book experience, okay? Not only, I'm going to give you my experience of how something like this develops. I'm going to read you a story. It's not my own. Most of the 50 books I've illustrated have been other people's. 6 of the best ones I've done were written by my wife, Sarah. But I've had the privilege also of working with some really wonderful, wonderful writers. And this is a manuscript by a woman named Sarah Weeks. I'd never read any of Sarah's work before. I think she's mainly known for her YA novels. That's young adult code. But she also had written some picture books. Her publisher is Scholastic. She's made a lot of money for them. And they wanted to publish her first different kind of picture book. I don't know what her others are like, but this one apparently had something different about it. And since we share an agent, our agent, Holly McGee, thought that I was the one who might be right to illustrate this text. She gave it to me across the lunch table in Manhattan one day at lunch, and she didn't have that look on her face. She wasn't wiggling her eyebrows or opening her eyes in any particular way that said, "This is really great and you better do it." I've gotten that before. In this case, Holly handed me this thing without any expression at all. And we talked about it after I'd read it the next day, and she said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "I think it's really good. I'm not sure it's for children, but it's certainly funny, and I certainly read it to Sarah out loud, and we had a few laughs, and I'm interested in seeing how it might develop. I'd like to be part of it." She said, "I had the same feeling, so let's talk about what needs to be changed," and so on. This is basically the manuscript I got. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to bring the screen down, right? And I'm going to show you what I did with it in terms of pictures. The illustrator's job being to retell the story in pictures and to add whatever it is pictures add that can't be said in words, or to expand the text where the illustrator feels it needs to be expanded in pictures. This is called Glamour Puss by Sarah Weeks. Oh, and by the way, let me just say too, the reason I picked this particular story to read tonight is because I think it embodies all of the characteristics that we talked about in class this morning in our 3-hour seminar about what makes a piece of literature maybe not great, but readable. It's got a good hook at the beginning, it gives you a good experience in the middle, and it wraps up in a really nice way. That basically, I think, are the 3 elements of a good story, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, for children, for adults. This one, I think, is both for children and adults. And the rule I'm breaking that's so awful is I'm talking about a book that is not available for sale tonight. So the bookseller out there is going to be very angry with me. It actually won't be published until spring 2015. But I'm reading it to you because I'm working on it now. I'm excited about it, and I wanted this to be an exciting talk. Glamour Puss. Once upon a pillow sat a glamorous cat, named Glamourpuss. You create your own pictures in your mind. Glamourpuss lived with Mr. and Mrs. Harrington in a giant mansion on top of a hill, where they were waited on hand and foot by a pair of devoted servants named Gustav and Rosalie. The Harringtons were gazillionaires. Having no children of their own, they focused all their attention on Glamourpuss. She had her own room and her own place at the dinner table. She even had a necklace made out of real diamonds. Unlike other cats, Glamourpuss wasn't expected to chase mice or rid the closet of moths. Her one and only job was to be glamorous, and she was very good at it. Glamourpuss didn't go downstairs, she descended. She didn't lie down, she reclined. She didn't stretch, she extended. And because she understood that less is sometimes more, instead of saying meow like an ordinary cat, she shortened it to just me. It's good, isn't it? It's lively writing, eh? Glamourpuss enjoyed living in the lap of luxury. She had everything a cat could possibly want. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington had only to ring a little silver bell, and Gustav and Rosalie came running. After a midday snack, Glamourpuss would practice being glamorous. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the most glamorous of all, she wondered. But of course, the answer was obvious. Me. One day, Glamourpuss was fine-tuning some of her favorite expressions. Terribly bored, slightly amused, haughty disdain, when the doorbell rang. Mr. Harrington's sister, Eugenia, had come all the way from Houston, Texas to visit, and it appeared from her luggage that she was planning to stay a while. And she had not come alone. There's just a little bit of dialogue here. It says, bow wow. And there was an author's note saying that a chihuahua was in one of the pieces of luggage. Glamourpuss took an instant dislike to Bluebell. Her tacky wardrobe and wagging tail were reason enough to shun her, but to make matters worse, Bluebell did tricks. Adorable, squealed Mrs. Harrington. First rate, boomed Mr. Harrington. Have y'all ever seen anything more precious in your entire life? Drawled Eugenia. Why couldn't you just eat her up with a spoon? Absolutely, thought Glamourpuss. And she added a new expression to her repertoire, utter disgust. Later, when no one was looking, Glamourpuss decided to show Bluebell a little trick of her own. Now this, I was told in a note by the author, that it should take place on a stairway with Bluebell coming down. She descended, she reclined, and then at just the right moment, she extended. And the dog falls over. Mean. Glamourpuss hoped Bluebell would get the message, stop trying to steal her thunder, but the very next day, there she was again, parading around the house in another ridiculous outfit. Then, right when Glamourpuss thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. Have y'all ever seen anything more glamorous in your whole life? Gushed Eugenia. Glamourpuss just couldn't believe her ears. How could anyone in their right mind think Bluebell was more glamorous than she was? It was preposterous, outrageous, absurd. And yet, deep down inside, Glamourpuss had to admit she was beginning to worry that it might actually be true. And later that day, when everyone else was taking a nap, Glamourpuss borrowed one of Bluebell's outfits. You'll see what I did with this. Mirror, mirror, who on the wall, who is the most glamorous of all, she wondered, and this time the answer seemed less obvious. Me? Nah. At dinner, Glamourpuss only picked at her food. Afterwards, when everyone retired to the conservatory to watch Bluebell do a new trick, Glamourpuss slunk upstairs to lick her wounds. The next morning, she overslept, and by the time she came downstairs, everyone had gone out. No one cares about me anymore, she thought sadly. But her pity party was interrupted by a strange noise from the guest room. When Glamour Puss went to investigate, she couldn't believe what she saw. Bad dog, scolded Eugenia when she discovered that Bluebell had torn up all of her outfits. At first, Glamour Puss was elated. Bluebell would have a hard time stealing her thunder now that she'd chewed up all her fancy clothes. But later, when she caught Bluebell doing a little practicing of her own in front of the mirror, she's imitating gestures that Bluebell has made before, Glamour Puss realized she'd made a terrible mistake. Bluebell wasn't a bad dog. She had chewed up her clothes because she despised them. All she really wanted to be was glamorous, like me. Over the next few days, Glamour Puss worked tirelessly with Bluebell, teaching her everything she knew about being glamorous. And Bluebell was a quick study. She mastered descending, reclining, and extending in no time flat. And it was she who came up with the idea of shortening bow wow to the much more glamorous wow. The Harringtons were very proud of the way Glamour Puss had taken Bluebell under her wing. Eugenia wasn't pleased at first, but eventually she learned to accept Bluebell's true nature. Bluebell, in turn, was eternally grateful to Glamour Puss for rescuing her from a life of public humiliation and unfortunate fashion. And as for Glamour Puss, she learned an important lesson, too. When it comes to being glamorous, less is sometimes more. But when it comes to having friends, you can never have too many. Sweet, eh? Yeah, we need to set up the pictures. Once upon a pillow sat a glamorous cat named Glamour Puss. Glamour Puss lived with Mr. and Mrs. Harrington in a giant mansion on top of a hill, where they were waited on hand and foot by a pair of devoted servants named Gustav and Rosalie. One of the things Sarah asked me as the author to the illustrator before she even knew I was going to do the book was to never show the heads of the adults. So the only adult's head you ever see in this book is Julie Andrews in this shot. The Harringtons were gazillionaires. Having no children, they focused all their attention on Glamour Puss, showering her with expensive gifts and unbridled affection. She had her own room. You'll notice she even has her own little toilet here with a cat box. And her own place at the dinner table. She even had a collar made of real diamonds. Unlike other cats, Glamour Puss wasn't expected to chase mice, rid the closet of moths. Her one and only job was to be glamorous, and she was very good at it. She didn't go downstairs, she descended. She didn't lie down, she reclined. She didn't stretch, she extended. She enjoyed living in the lap of luxury. She had everything a cat could possibly want. The Harringtons only had to ring a little silver bell, and Gustav and Rosalie came running. And you could see they've got catnip crackers on one tray and sardines on another. After a delicious snack, Glamour Puss would practice being glamorous. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most glamorous of all, she wondered, but of course the answer was obvious. Me. And it's reflected backwards in the mirror. And because she understood that less is sometimes more, instead of saying meow like an ordinary cat, she just shortened it to me. When you tilt the angle of things, you know, it always looks a little insane. One day, Glamour Puss was fine-tuning some of her favorite expressions. Terribly bored, slightly amused, haughty disdain. The doorbell rang. Mr. Harrington's sister Eugenia had come all the way from Houston, Texas. It appeared she planned to stay a while. And she had not come alone. Bow wow. Glamour Puss took an instant dislike to Bluebell. Her tacky wardrobe and wagging tail were enough to shun her, but to make matters worse, Bluebell did tricks. Adorable, squealed Mrs. Harrington. First rate, boomed Mr. Harrington. Eugenia, have y'all ever seen anything more precious in your entire life? Why couldn't you just eat her up with a spoon? Absolutely, thought Glamour Puss. And she added a new expression to her repertoire, utter disgust. Later on, when no one was looking, Glamour Puss decided to show Bluebell a little trick of her own. She descended and reclined, and then, just at the right moment, she extended. Glamour Puss hoped Bluebell would get the message and stop trying to steal her thunder. But the next day, there she was again, parading around the house in another ridiculous outfit. And I've got the greatest idea for end papers for this book. It's going to be Bluebell wardrobe wallpaper. Like maybe 20 little spots in patterns of her in a different outfit, interspersed with Glamour Puss being glamorous all in her own. Just the things got worse. Have y'all ever seen anything more glamorous in your life? Gushed Eugenia. Glamour Puss couldn't believe her ears. How could anyone in their right mind think Bluebell was more glamorous than she was? It was preposterous, outrageous, absurd. And yet, deep down, Glamour Puss had to admit she really was beginning to worry it might actually be true. I like the nail-biting gesture. Later that day, when everyone else was taking a nap, Glamour Puss borrowed one of Bluebell's outfits. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most glamorous of all? This time the answer was less obvious. Me? After dinner, Glamour Puss only picked at her food. Afterwards, while everyone retired to the conservatory to watch Bluebell perform a new trick, Glamour Puss slunk upstairs to lick her wounds. The next day, Glamour Puss overslept. By the time she woke up, everyone had gone out. Nobody cares about me anymore, she thought sadly. Her pity party was interrupted by a strange noise from the guest room. I've got some type repetition here. When Glamour Puss went to investigate, she couldn't believe what she saw. Bad dog, scolded Eugenia when she discovered what Bluebell had done. At first, Glamour Puss was elated. The lighting, please notice the lighting. Please notice the Statue of Victory over by the wall. Bluebell would have a hard time stealing her fire now that she'd chewed up all her fancy clothes. But later, when she caught Bluebell doing a little practicing of her own, Glamour Puss realized she had made a terrible mistake. Bluebell had chewed up her clothes because she despised them. Who could blame her? The poor thing had been trapped in a nightmare of hoop skirts and fruit-covered turbans, when all she really wanted was to be glamorous, like me. Over the next few days, Glamour Puss worked tirelessly with Bluebell, teaching her everything she knew about being glamorous. Bluebell was a quick study. She mastered descending, reclining, and extending in no time flat. True, she sometimes needed to be reminded that tail wagging is undignified. But it was Bluebell herself who came up with the idea of shortening bow wow to the much more glamorous wow. We've changed the name, you can see, of the people. It's not the High Horsens, it's the Harringtons. We're very proud of the way Glamour Puss had taken Bluebell under her wing. Eugenia wasn't happy about it at first, but eventually she learned to accept Bluebell's true nature. I want you to notice that the servants are holding arms there. There's been something going on in the back room. As for Glamour Puss, she learned an important lesson too. When it comes to being glamorous, less is sometimes more. But when it comes to having friends, you can never have too many. So that's that. What more can I tell you? It's a good story. It's better with pictures, I think. I think kids are going to get the joke. A friend of mine who teaches elementary school, when he read this manuscript, was horrified. He said, "You're not going to illustrate this, are you? This teaches little girls to do exactly the kinds of things the little girls are driven insane by in elementary school." But I stuck to my guns, and now he likes the book, and he realizes that If you do, you can depict anything. It just determine, you know, it's the acceptance by the public is going to be determined by the style. And in this case, we've got a Warner Brothers cartoon basically going on here. And I think the art has overcome his objections and his fears. So I thank you very much for your attention.